The Dayspring from on high hath visited us, to give light unto them that sit in darkness and in the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the way of peace. Dayspring is an effort to be in touch with good people who love God and who believe that the Bible is His Word. Dayspring is brought to you by your neighbors from Churches of Christ in this area. And now, visit with us as we draw near to God.
Welcome in, good friends. I'm so delighted to have an association with you, and I'm thankful for the time you spend with us before an open Bible. John's account of the life of Christ. We shall give special attention to that account today. One of the significant things about John's account of the Lord's life is the signs we read therein. It is full of signs, and a sign is something that points down the road to something else. If you're in your automobile traveling down the interstate and you're hungry and you see a sign over on the side that points 2 miles ahead, and there's all the beautiful pictures of hamburgers and French fries and all kinds of good food on that sign. Well, you don't stop at the sign. Instead, you take that as an indication of what's still further down the road. So when we think about the signs in John's account of the life of Christ, they're pointing to something else. Like, for instance, back in Exodus chapter 4, when God called on Moses to go back down into the land of Egypt and lead his people out of bondage, God gave Moses some signs which were to be used to convince those people that he was their leader. One of the signs was that Moses could put his rod on the ground and it would turn into a serpent. And then he could reach down and pick up that serpent and it would turn back into his rod. It's called a sign. And then Moses was taught to put his hand inside his coat, and when he pulled it out, it was leprous. But Moses could then insert his hand inside his coat again and pull it out, and the leprosy was gone. Talking about things like that, God said to Moses, "It shall come to pass, if they will not believe thee, neither hearken to the voice of the first sign, that they will believe the voice of the latter sign," given you two. "And it shall come to pass, if they will not believe also these two signs, neither hearken unto thy voice, that thou shalt take of the water of the river and pour it upon the dry land, and the water which thou takest out of the river shall become blood upon dry land." God said, "Moses, I'm equipping you with signs." What are those signs good for? They're going to point the people to you in proof that you are my spokesman and that I have sent you to lead them out of the land of Egypt. Therefore, we ought to give the more earnest heed to the things we've heard, lest at any time we should let them slip. For if the word spoken by angels was steadfast, and every transgression and disobedience received a just recompense of reward, how shall we escape if we neglect so great salvation, which at first began to be spoken of the Lord, and was confirmed unto us by them that heard him? God also bearing them witness with signs and wonders and divers miracles and gifts of the Holy Ghost according to his own will. Christ came, and accompanying Christ were those who told us about him, and God equipped them with signs. And those signs were designed to convince people that the apostles who had those signs were speaking for Christ. Signs pointed to something else. Ye men of Israel, hear these words. Jesus of Nazareth, a man approved of God among you by miracles and wonders and signs, which God did by him in the midst of you, as ye yourself also know. Signs, supernatural events, which were designed to point to the fact that the message came from God. It was a supernatural event. In Romans chapter 4 and at verse 11, Paul's record says, and he received the sign of circumcision, it's Abraham, a seal of the righteousness of the faith which he had, yet being uncircumcised, that he might be the father of all them that believe. Now listen, God commanded Abraham to circumcise himself and his children and his servants. And Paul said that was a sign. It was a sign of what? It was a sign to those people that they were made righteous by God by faith. Faith was what commended them to the Lord, even back in Abraham's day. And as a sign of that, they were circumcised in their flesh. And every time they were reminded of their circumcision, they thought, this is a sign of something else. It is a sign that we are justified by faith. So Paul said to the Corinthians in 2 Corinthians chapter 12 and verse 12, he said, truly the signs of an apostle were wrought among you. The signs of an apostle? So how do we know this is an apostle? How do we know that he's receiving his message from God? Well, God is going to give that apostle some signs, the ability to work miracles and wonders, and those were a sign of something else. They were a sign that God had sent them and that they spoke from God. Now, let's turn to John. John's marvelous account of the life of Christ. In John chapter 2, I read of the first of those signs. John chapter 2, beginning at verse 1. The third day, there was a marriage in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. And both Jesus was called and his disciples to the marriage. And when they wanted wine, the mother of Jesus saith unto him, they have no wine. Jesus saith unto her, woman, what have I to do with thee? Mine hour is not yet come. His mother saith unto the servants, whatsoever he saith unto you, do it. And there were set there 6 water pots of stone, and after the manner of the purifying of the Jews, containing 2 or 3 firkins each apiece. Jesus saith unto them, fill the water pots with water. And they filled them up to the brim. He saith unto them, draw out now, and bear unto the governor of the feast. And they did it. And when the ruler of the feast had tasted the water that was made wine, and knew that not whence it was, but the servants which drew the water knew, the governor of the feast called the bridegroom, and saith unto him, Every man at the beginning doth set forth good wine, and when men have well drunk, then that which is worse. But thou hast kept the good wine until now. Listen to how that ends. This beginning of miracles did Jesus in Cana of Galilee, and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed on him. There's the beginning of the signs. He turned water into wine. Obviously supernatural. He worked a miracle. And what is that? That's a sign of something else. It points to something other than just the water turned to wine. It points to the fact that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. I turn from John chapter 2, the beginning of the miracles, John chapter 4. In John chapter 4, at verse 46, So Jesus came again into Cana of Galilee, where he made the water wine, and there was a certain nobleman whose son was sick at Capernaum. And when he heard that Jesus was come out of Judea into Galilee, he went to him and besought him that he would come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. Then said Jesus unto him, Except ye see signs and wonders, ye will not believe. That's all they wanted, signs and wonders. The nobleman saith unto him, Sir, come down ere my child die. Jesus saith unto him, Go thy way, thy son lives. And the man believed the word that Jesus had spoken unto him, and he went his way. And as he was now going down, his servants met him and told him, saying, Thy son lives. Then inquired he of them the hour when he began to amend, and they said unto him, Yesterday at the 7th hour the fever left him. So the father knew that it was at the same hour in which Jesus said unto him, Thy son lives, and himself believed, and his whole house. This is again the second miracle that Jesus did when he was come out of Judea into Galilee. Number 2, a sign. It was a sign of something else. Just a miracle? More than that, it pointed to the fact that Jesus was the Son of God. John chapter 5 at verse 1. After this there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Verse 5. And a certain man was there which had an infirmity 38 years. When Jesus saw him lie, and knew that he'd been now a long time in that case, he saith unto him, Wilt thou be made whole? The impotent man answered him, Sir, I have no man, when the water is troubled, to put me into the pool. But while I'm coming, another steps down before me. Jesus saith unto him, Rise, take up thy bed, and walk. And immediately the man was made whole, and took up his bed and walked. And on the same day was the Sabbath. This man was made whole who'd been lame. Jesus did it. A miracle. Not just a miracle, but a sign of something else. Of what was it a sign? It was a sign that Jesus was the Christ, the Son of the living God. Look in John chapter 6. In John chapter 6, at verse 5, beginning, When Jesus then lifted up his eyes, and saw a great company come unto him, he saith unto Philip, Whence shall we buy bread that these may eat? This he said to prove him, for he himself knew what he would do. Philip answered him, 200 pennyworth of bread is not sufficient for them, that every one of them may take a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, saith unto him, There is a lad here, which hath 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish. But what are these among so many? Jesus said, Make the men to sit down. Now there was much grass in the place. So the men sat down, in number about 5,000. And Jesus took the loaves. When he had given thanks, he distributed to the disciples, and the disciples to them that were set down, and likewise of the fish as much as they would. And when they were filled, he said unto the disciples, Gather up the fragments that remain, that nothing be lost. Therefore they gathered them together, and filled the 12 baskets with the fragments of the 5 barley loaves, which remained over and above unto them that had eaten. Those men, when they had seen the miracle that Jesus did, said, This is of a truth the prophet that shall come into the world. Jesus fed 5,000 men with 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. A great miracle recorded for us by John. A miracle, yes, but more than a miracle. What is it, John? This is a sign. What do you mean a sign? It is a sign to indicate to us that Jesus is God's only begotten Son, the Savior of the world, and the Son of God. Proof. John chapter 9. In John chapter 9, we read about another of those signs. Jesus passed by. He saw a man which was blind from his birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, Neither hath this man sinned nor his parents, but that the works of God should be made manifest in him. I must work the works of him that sent me while it's day, for the night comes when no man can work. Listen, when he had thus spoken, he spat on the ground and made clay of the spittle, and he anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay, and said unto him, Go wash in the pool of Siloam, which is by interpretation sent. He went his way therefore, and washed, and came seeing. The neighbors therefore, and they that which before had seen him that was blind, said, Is this not he that sat and begged? Some said, This is he. Others said, He's like him. But he said, I am he. Therefore said they unto him, How were thine eyes opened? He answered and said, A man that is called Jesus made clay, and anointed mine eyes, and said unto me, Go to the pool of Siloam and wash. And I went and washed, and I received sight. Then said they unto him, Where is he? He said, I know not. They brought to the Pharisees him that aforetime was blind. And it was the Sabbath day when Jesus made the clay and opened his eyes. Then again the Pharisees also asked how he had received his sight. He said unto them, He put clay upon my eyes, and I washed, and I do see. Obviously, a great miracle had occurred, and they were not prepared to receive it. Verse 18, But the Jews did not believe concerning him, that he had been blind and received his sight, until they called the parents of him that had received his sight. And they asked them, saying, Is this your son, who ye say was born blind? How then doth he now see? His parents answered them and said, We know that this is our son, and that he was born blind. But by what means he now sees, we know not. Or who hath opened his eyes, we know not. He is of age, ask him, he shall speak for himself. There's that great sign, but they did not want to accept it. So later in that chapter, at verse 30, the Bible says, the man answered and said unto them, Why, herein is a marvelous thing, that ye know not from whence he is, and yet he hath opened mine eyes. Now we know that God hears not sinners, but if any man be a worshipper of God, and doeth his will, him he heareth. Since the world began, was it not heard that any man opened the eyes of one that was born blind? If this man were not of God, he could do nothing. He's of God, and therefore he can open the eyes of the blind. A great miracle occurred. The man was given his sight. They couldn't deny it. They tried every way they could to deny it. So why was this miracle done? Well, John would tell us this is another sign. Not just the miracle itself, but the sign pointed to something else. The fact that the one who did the miracle is Jesus, the Christ, the Son of the living God. And so briefly I turn over to John chapter 11. In John chapter 11, verse 1, Now a certain man was sick, named Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and his sister Martha. It was that Mary which anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. Therefore his sister sent for him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom thou lovest is sick. When Jesus heard that, he said, This sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified thereby. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. When he'd heard, therefore, that he was sick, he abode 2 days still at the place where he was. Then after that he saith to his disciples, Let us go unto Judea again. His disciples said unto him, Master, the Jews of late sought to stone thee, and goest thou hither again? Jesus said, We're going back. And so at verse 11, These things said he, and after that he saith unto them, Our friend Lazarus sleeps, but I go that I may wake him out of his sleep. They said unto his disciples, Lord, if he sleep, he shall do well. Howbeit Jesus spake of his death. But they thought that he had spoken of taking a rest in sleep. Then said Jesus unto them plainly, Lazarus is dead, and I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, to the intent you may believe. Nevertheless, let us go unto him. Jesus went to the grave of Lazarus. And verse 17, when Jesus came, he found that he had lain in the grave 4 days already. Verse 20, Then Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him, but Martha was still in the house. Then said Martha unto Jesus, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. But I know that even now, whatsoever thou wilt ask of God, God will give it thee. Jesus saith unto her, Thy brother shall live again. Martha saith unto him, I know that he shall rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. Believest thou this? She saith unto him, Yea, Lord, I believe that thou art the Christ, the Son of God, which should come into the world. She was convinced already that this was the Christ, the Son of the living God. Now listen, over at verse 32. Then when Mary was come where Jesus was and saw him, she fell down at his feet, saying unto him, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. When Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews also weeping which came with her, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled, and said, Where have you laid him? They said unto him, Lord, come and see. Jesus wept. Then said the Jews, Behold how he loved him. Well, you know what happened. Jesus went to the grave of Lazarus and gave instructions to roll the tomb, the stone away from the cave. And the objection was, he's been there too long, he will smell. But they did, and Jesus went to the tomb and spoke down into it and said, Lazarus, come forth. And he did. And Jesus said, Take his grave clothes off of him and loose him and let him go. A great miracle. Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. Why? John, why are you recording this for us? Because it's a sign. Of what is it a sign? It is a sign that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. Now listen to this summary statement. John chapter 20, verse 30. John wrote this, Many other signs truly did Jesus, which are not written in this book, but these are written that ye might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God, and that believing you might have life through his name. Jesus is God's Son. Whatever he bids us do, we should do it because he is the Son of God. Thank you for letting me talk with you about the signs in John's account of the life of Christ. Until the next time, may the goodness of God be yours in full measure.
You've been watching Dayspring. Dayspring is brought to you by your friends in local area churches of Christ. To request a free CD of today's lesson, you may contact us at Dayspring, Post Office Box 453, Tupelo, Mississippi, 38802, 0453. There is no cost for this offer. You will not be asked for financial support. You can also phone your request toll-free at 1-866-842-4139. Or you can go to our website at dayspringtv.com. Thank you for visiting with us on Dayspring. May your joy be full. May the peace of God rule in your hearts. And may the light of Christ brighten heaven's way.